The Second Crusade, which occurred from 1147 to 1149, was initiated in response to the capture of the county of Edessa a year earlier by Zengi's forces. Edessa had been established during the First Crusade of 1096 to 1099 by Baldwin of Boulogne in 1098, marking it as the inaugural Crusader state to both rise and fall. Pope Eugene III announced the Second Crusade, marking the first time European monarchs, particularly Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Hohenstaufen, led a crusade. They were joined by several European nobles. Notably, both monarchs led separate expeditions, traversing Europe independently. Following their incursions into Byzantine territory in Anatolia, the Seljuk Turks defeated both armies individually. Odo of Duil, a prominent Western Christian source, and Syrian Christian accounts suggest that the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos covertly obstructed the progress of the Crusaders, particularly in Anatolia, possibly instigating Turkish attacks. In 1148, Louis, Conrad, and the remnants of their forces reached Jerusalem, where they participated in an ill-fated assault on Damascus. The Eastern campaign of the Second Crusade proved unsuccessful for the Crusaders but a significant triumph for the Muslims, ultimately influencing the fall of Jerusalem and catalyzing the Third Crusade at the end of the 12th century. The only notable achievement of the Second Crusade came in 1147 when a coalition of 13,000 Flemish, Frisians, Normans, English, Scots, and German crusaders, en route to the Holy Land by sea, halted to assist a smaller Portuguese army of 7,000 knights in the conquest of Lisbon, effectively ousting the Moorish occupants. Following the First Crusade, Christians controlled three pivotal regions: Edessa, Jerusalem, and Ansh, with Tripoli added in 1109. Edessa, situated in the north, had the smallest population and faced sporadic Muslim attacks. In 1145, Edessa was captured by the Muslims, prompting Pope Eugene III to send a request for a second crusade to Louis VII of France in December of the same year. The idea was to organize a more extensive and better planned campaign, but the initial response was tepid. Furthermore, Louis initially announced his own crusade, which never materialized due to his overthrow. Ultimately, in 1146, Bernard of Clairvaux promoted a joint crusade throughout France. Compared to the fervor of the First Crusade in 1096, European enthusiasm for the Second Crusade was notably subdued. Saint Bernard emphasized the significance of carrying crosses, leading to a surge in cross production and increased support from ordinary people. Support for the crusade came from various regions, including Hungary, the Byzantine Empire, and the Kingdom of Sicily. Priest sermons incited violence against Jews, as many Christians believed their support for the crusade was insufficient. Mainz experienced particular unrest, led by the zealous French monk Rudolf, which Saint Bernard strove to pacify during his travels across Western Europe. He ultimately quelled Rudolf and sent him back to the monastery. German King Conrad III initially showed no interest in the crusade but changed his stance after witnessing a ceremony led by Saint Bernard in December 1146. He joined the ranks of ordinary crusaders. As Bernard journeyed through Europe, he gathered as many supporters as possible for the forthcoming crusade. Pope Eugene III simultaneously announced the crusade in Spain, where a conflict against the Moors was ongoing, urging Spaniards to continue their struggle against the Moors and authorizing French and Italian territories to assist them. In other parts of Italy, the Pope encouraged various groups and leaders to participate in the crusade. The investiture controversy took place during this period, and the Pope was displeased by King Conrad III's participation in the crusade, as it reduced papal influence, although he did not forbid Conrad III from going to the east. On February 16, 1147, the French Crusaders convened in attempts to decide on their route. Meanwhile, the Germans had already chosen a route through Hungary, opting for a land journey rather than a sea voyage, which the French also eventually selected, even though some participants were offended by this choice. Both the French and Germans agreed to meet in Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. In mid-May, a group of English volunteers initiated the crusade, composed of individuals from Flemish, Frisian, Scottish, and German backgrounds. They arrived in Portugal in June and, influenced by the bishop, embarked on a campaign to claim Lisbon for Portugal. In 1147, Lisbon was under Moorish rule, not Portuguese, making its conquest a necessity. The Crusader assault on Lisbon commenced on July 1 and concluded on August 14, resulting in its capture. Subsequently, the Crusaders looted Lisbon before delivering it to King Alfonso. Some remained in the newly acquired city, while others packed up and headed east. In May 1147, the German expedition, accompanied by French and southern German participants, set out on a land journey. King Conrad's forces were joined by the King of Styria, and King Gazar II of Hungary reluctantly permitted the Crusaders to pass through his neighboring country. Hungary shared a border with Germany in 1147. The Byzantines were concerned about a potential attack from the Crusaders and, to prevent it, raised an army. This led to minor conflicts and some casualties. Moreover, a flood in early September claimed the lives of several Germans. The crossing of the Byzantine Empire did not go smoothly, but the Crusaders ultimately reached Constantinople. King Conrad chose not to wait for the French Crusaders and proceeded to the city of Iconium in western Turkey. There, he divided his army into two units. One of these divisions suffered defeat in August 1147 at the hands of the Seljuk Turks, who employed tactics of retreat and ambush against pursuing soldiers. They also resorted to the scorched earth strategy by confiscating resources and poisoning wells, leaving the Crusaders grappling with hunger and thirst. As a result of daily Seljuk Turkish attacks, Conceal began a retreat towards Constantinople. The Seljuk Turks managed to eliminate the entire rearguard of the Crusade, and in one battle, Conrad himself sustained injuries. A similar fate befell the second group of soldiers led by Otto of Freising in the spring of 1148. The French Crusaders, under the leadership of Louis and a sizable assembly of nobles, departed from Metz. They joined forces with an English army, opting to follow the same route as Conceal. Meanwhile, an army from Toulouse, commanded by Alfonso of Toulouse, chose to postpone its departure until August and then travel by sea. Louis and his forces arrived in Hungary, much like Conceal. However, they encountered difficulties with Riza of Hungary because it was revealed that Louis had allowed Hungarian conquerors to participate in the crusade. Relations with the Byzantine Empire were strained, but the French were allowed passage. The Byzantine Empire refrained from initiating hostilities against the Crusaders because, while the emperor feared that permitting the army to pass through might jeopardize relations with Muslim neighbors, he recognized that he could not contend with this formidable force. Upon reaching Constantinople, the crusade was progressing reasonably well. A segment of the German army had successfully taken the city of Iconium, a significant advancement. This motivated the French to continue the crusade, though they received no support from the Byzantine Empire, which was preoccupied with another conflict. Unlike the First Crusade, the Crusaders relied entirely on an army composed of Western European forces. The French encountered the remaining German Crusaders in the region of Nicaea, which was a part of the Byzantine Empire situated beneath Constantinople. This group followed the same path as Otto van Freising had previously taken. In December, they reached Ephesus where they received warnings about the dangerous and cunning tactics employed by the Turks. Despite these warnings, Louis chose to disregard them and continued his journey, while Conrad returned to Constantinople due to illness. As anticipated, the Crusaders led by Louis were soon engaged by a Turkish army. Contrary to expectations, the Crusaders achieved a victory over the Turks. In the winter of 1148, the Crusaders arrived in Laodicea, shortly after Otto of Freising's army had suffered a defeat at the same location. The Crusaders were not confronted by the Turks again for the rest of their journey. The Turks created hardships for the Crusaders by burning the crops in their path, hoping to starve both the Crusaders and their horses. Winter and hunger indeed posed significant challenges to the crusading army. Louis and his troops traveled to Ardaliar with the intention of reaching Ansh by boat. However, Ardaliar had an insufficient number of boats for the entire army. As a result, only Louis and other nobles could sail to Anjou, while the rest of the army had to travel overland. Disease and Turkish attacks took a heavy toll on this army, and it was greatly diminished. From Anjou, the journey to Jerusalem was straightforward, as both Anjou and Jerusalem were under Western control. In a matter of months, Louis, Otto of Freising, who had been defeated but survived, the now recovered Conrad, and many other prominent crusaders gathered in Jerusalem. Additionally, the armies of Alphonse of Toulouse, who had been assassinated in Caesarea Maritima in 1148, and a force from Lisbon also arrived in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, following discussions, it was decided to launch an assault on the city of Damascus. This decision was somewhat peculiar since Damascus was a secondary concern, and the primary goal of the Crusades was to retain control of the holy city of Jerusalem in Christian hands. The real adversary was the Atabeg of Aleppo, Nur ad-Din, the son of Zengi the Terrible, who had captured Edessa. The Atabeg of Damascus had recently made peace with King Baldwin III of Jerusalem and was at odds with the formidable Aleppo. However, the Crusaders' desire for power became strong enough to attempt this endeavor. After the setbacks in Anatolia, they hoped to capture a prosperous city, as there was little honor to be gained from defending the Crusader states against Nur ad-Din, but a victory and substantial riches could be acquired. On July 23, 1148, an army reached Damascus. Leading the way was the original Jerusalem army, with Conrad and Louis following behind. This attempt to capture Damascus ended in disaster. The Muslims were well prepared for the assault and were more familiar with the terrain of Damascus. They launched attacks on the Crusader army from the orchards. Despite the external assaults, the Crusaders managed to reach the city's walls. However, Damascus received military support from their archenemy, Nur ad-Din, who saw an opportunity. After 4 days, the Crusaders withdrew upon learning that Nur ad-Din's main force was approaching to attack them from the rear. This endeavor to conquer Damascus was a political blunder. It resulted in unnecessary casualties and, more significantly, drove Damascus into the enemy's camp. The Muslim rulers in the region lost confidence in the Crusaders. Previously, neighboring Islamic states had reluctantly accepted the Crusader states, established peace, and engaged in trade. However, this situation was now irreparably broken. Damascus was inevitably becoming dependent on Nur ad-Din, whose empire would eventually be succeeded by Saladin. Saladin united the Syrian-Egyptian Empire, posing a formidable challenge to the Christians and eventually leading to the fall of Jerusalem. In essence, the crusade was a failure. Raynaud of Chatillon targeted Muslim caravans during the truce between Saladin and Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. Saladin swiftly moved against Raynaud's castle, nearly provoking a war. A more significant provocation was a naval raid on the holy Muslim cities of Mecca and Medina, which Saladin could not overlook. After Baldwin's death, his brother-in-law Guy de Lusignan came to power and, with the assistance of Raynaud de Chatillon, attacked Saladin's army. The European army struggled to navigate the desert terrain and eventually became exhausted. When they could no longer advance, Saladin struck, leading to the destruction of the European army. He then proceeded to Jerusalem. The residents and soldiers of Jerusalem defended the city but were eventually forced to surrender. Saladin, aiming to avoid further bloodshed, offered them a safe retreat to Jaffa. Jerusalem was evacuated, and Saladin's forces took control of the city. Upon hearing this news in France, the Pope called for a new war in the form of the Third Crusade. Thanks for watching this video. If you like the video, please subscribe to our channel.